So with the end of the UN MCR War, the system changed quite drastically in the events that immediately followed the end of the conflict, so I figured today we would take a closer look at how the war ended and what the system was like after the end of the war. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So, for those of you who don't know, the UN MCR War is the largest military conflict within the universe of the Expanse. It is the long-brewing conflict between the United Nations and the Martian Congressional Republic, and saw the system plunged into one of its first major interplanetary wars. And while the conflict was relatively brief and in the grand scheme of things fairly isolated to the outer planets, it was still very devastating and shaped the future of humanity going forward. It saw the UN and the MCR come to blows, mostly, like I said, in the outer planets, specifically, primarily in the Jovian system, but there was fighting elsewhere across the system. The conflict, however, came to a dramatic close with the Battle of Io, which was a showdown between the UN Navy and itself, where mutiny within UNN ships caused a sort of team-killing incident, for lack of a better word. And this incident and the confusion following it ultimately resulted in a ceasefire and the information that the war was started by Undersecretary Ehrenreich of the UN. This information led to the arrest of Ehrenreich and the end of the conflict, with an armistice signed shortly after the Battle of Io. So with the war over, the shape of the system changed rather drastically, and a few major political elements had been altered by the conflict. For starters, neither the UN or the Martian Congressional Republic was able to achieve major strategic goals during the conflict. The largest strategic win on either side would be the UN managing to successfully neutralize the Martian Congressional Republic's first strike capability, mainly their stealth nuclear missile platforms. However, in the conflict as a whole, the UN lost a much larger portion of its fleet than the Martian Congressional Republic. So, ultimately, the balance of power between both factions didn't really change that much, and it could be argued that in the aftermath of the conflict, the factions were closer and worked together more frequently. However, outside of the two factions, there was a vast change within the system, the first being the OPA. The Outer Planets Alliance predated the war and was a widespread populist movement within the Outer Planets. But with the outbreak of war between the UN and the MCR, the system was distracted, with everyone focusing on the system-wide conflict between Earth and Mars. The OPA was able to sort of grab some ground, including claiming sovereignty over systems like Ceres. Not only was the OPA able to seize an air of legitimacy and claim to found their own government, they actually began the productions of a formal navy, including the induction of what would be the largest warship in human history, the Behemoth, a former interstellar colony ship, one that the OPA had commandeered following the Eros incident and had converted into a large warship. So with the OPA being its own faction and claiming to have equal footing as the UN or the Martian Congressional Republic, the system was now sort of in the middle of a tripolar political state. But the rise of the OPA wasn't the only other major change to come right at the end of the war. The Protomolecule incident occurred on Venus. The Protomolecule event, or the Protomolecule incident, is when the Protomolecule left over from the Eros incident separated itself from Venus and ventured into the outer reaches of the solar system, where it formed a ring that would eventually become the Ring Gate. At the end of the war, the Ring Gate had yet to be activated. It was a mysterious piece of protomolecule technology on the fringes of the system that no one really understood. In the aftermath of the war, both fleets, the fleets of the United Nations and the fleets of the Martian Congressional Republic, converged on the ring and set up a sort of quarantine area. After all, they were uncertain of the purpose of this new artifact within their system. It could have been anything from a weapon to a gateway, which it ultimately ended up being. It wasn't actually until the OPA had managed to accidentally open this gate. It wasn't actually the OPA, it was a Belter skiff, but many credit it to the OPA in the historical tense. Still, the UN and the MCR converged on this gate actually forming sort of a bridge between both factions, with both the UN and the Martian Congressional Republic having an interest in studying, understanding, and observing this new artifact. Having witnessed firsthand the power and capability of the protomolecule, understandably they were concerned of what this could be used for. So that actually brought a little bit of cooperation in this shattered system, with both sides having a vested interest in understanding and possibly containing this new piece of technology. So, the OPA is functioning as its own faction for the first time in its history. Mars and Earth are both shattered remnants of what they once were, but trying to work together to understand this new piece of technology, which has drastically shaped the potential futures humanity could face. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the ring gate would be opened, and the events that would follow would really come to lead forward into a interstellar future for humanity. If you'd like to learn about the UN MCR War, the conflict that sort of was the catalyst for all of this, I'll leave a link up here to my battle analysis on the conflict as a whole. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think it makes sense for Earth and Mars to be able to field significant fleets in the vicinity of the ring gate immediately following this major conflict, or would they be a little bit more reserved about the ships they could afford to send off to investigate this mysterious ring when their homeworlds would be left virtually undefended? And if you have anything else from The Expanse you'd like to see me cover, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.